Hello, this is Howard Rubin again. Today I want to talk about a strange inconvenient truth. An inconvenient truth has to do with the fact that most technology benchmarking is just not done properly. And in my work and my team's work in technology economics, we've arrived at a number of what we consider the basic tenets of technology measurement and benchmarking. There is no single measure or metric that can completely address the key questions companies have, which are we spending enough on technology? Are we spending the right amount? Are we getting a value out of it? And that's like number one is that there's no single metric that answered that question. So don't get fooled. The inconvenient truth is that most organizations and most consultancies just focus on one metric. Number two, and what do these metrics look like? Is simple ratios of technology spending versus revenue, or technology spending versus operating expense, or any single combination of those things just don't work. And in fact, the other part of the basic tenets, I would say, is you need to understand the components of the technology spent to even do a decent job of benchmarking them. And in the world of technology economics, you want to understand not what the input is, what the outcome is. So this adds a whole bunch of dimensionality. So tenet number three really is that, in fact, you need to understand the cost of an organization of keeping the lights on, and you need to understand what it's investing. And that investing is usually called change. Change is a very broad term, but change could be anything from building new systems and platforms to introducing new technology like AI, which changes the way the organization works, to spending money on modernization, for keeping your cyber stuff up to date, and a whole bunch of other things. And the other aspect of it, for real competitive analysis, you want to understand how efficient you are. That's how you keep the lights on cost and how that's improving over time, how that's scaling versus revenue, either up or down. That's a whole other situation, understanding your economic agility. But number two is, what are the outcomes you're getting out of that? And are you competitive in terms of what you're spending versus your peers? Because I hate to use the word war in this climate, but there's really a technology war going on and companies spending, expecting results, and the scale of your competitors. Perhaps the fourth one, which is absolutely key, where you're going to benchmark, what the heck are you going to benchmark against? So what's the choice of peers? And the peers are maybe companies that you're competing with today, but that group might be companies you're competing with in the future. If you really understand more of what's going on in the market, maybe you want to benchmark against technology companies and things that are outside of your realm, but also understand if you're for profit, it's a different view than, in fact, if you're a government agency doing things for health, education, and welfare of your citizens. And that becomes more of a global piece to look at. But choice of a reference point, that's your peers, is critical. And one of the big issues is, how the heck do you benchmark? There are lots of terminology in the field, but in terms of really having any standard reference point, the closest you have is the TBM model. But again, the different interpretations of what all these different things mean. The TBM stands for technology and business management. So when you do a benchmark, I would say the other tenet I have, and this is number five on my list, has to do with the fact that you don't want to take your data and map to someone else's structure. It's best if you're doing benchmark work. And that's where you need a technology economist to help you with benchmarking, is to map external data into your structure. It's mapping things into your language. So the question never will come up again is, how do we know this is apples to apples? Because you're controlling that in terms of understanding external data matching to your apples versus taking your apples and matching to someone's pear tree. So it becomes a total mess. And the last piece, it was really interesting. So I've been using the word benchmarking, 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 but the real question comes up with, so what are the benchmarks? And people talk about best in class. And many consultancies say, well, best in class are the companies that are doing this at lowest cost. Lowest cost with poor performance doesn't buy it. So understanding what best in class means has to be in multiple dimensions. And for profit companies, it might be best in class margin, or best in class sustained growth, or best in class in dimensions of operational efficiency and effectiveness, or customer primacy, or net promoter score, or beyond that, product development time and getting products to market. So understand clearly what best in class must mean. And that's why I keep using the term about technology economists, and we even have technology economist certification programs. Because to understand best in class, you have to get a map against what the outcomes are and what are the outcomes you aspire to. So think about the five or six things I just mentioned. You can group them in different ways. There's no single metric. Simple ratios will fool you. You really need to break the expenses down into components of run and investment. Choice of peers is critical. There's no standard for reporting, unfortunately. So map things into yours as best you can, or use a technology economist externally to help you do that and really understand what best in class is. So the inconvenient truth is that everybody talks about benchmarking. Most organizations aren't doing it properly. And hopefully these guidelines will help you. Thanks a lot and more to follow.